The laughter stopped the moment Nathan Brooks walked into the reunion. For years, his former classmates had remembered him as the poor, awkward boy they bullied in the hallways of a high school in Denver, Colorado. They remembered the cheap clothes, the worn-out shoes, and the way he used to eat lunch alone. They remembered him as the boy who had failed to fit in. What they did not know was that the quiet single father walking through the doors that night was no longer the struggling teenager they had humiliated. He was now one of the wealthiest men in America, and the very people who had invited him to laugh at him were about to discover that the person they thought had lost in life had quietly built an empire worth billions. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and never judging someone by their past, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional and inspiring stories. Nathan had never forgotten high school, but he had never allowed it to define him either. At 17, he had been the quiet son of a single mother who worked 2 jobs to keep their small apartment in Denver. Nathan wore the same 2 jackets throughout the winter, carried an old backpack with a broken zipper, and often went to school without breakfast. He tried to hide his struggles, but teenagers could be cruel when they sensed weakness. The worst of them was Brandon Mitchell, a popular student whose father owned several car dealerships. Brandon and his friends mocked Nathan almost every day. They laughed at his clothes, called him poor, and made jokes about his mother. When Nathan brought homemade food for lunch, they would make fun of it. When he tried to join a group project, they would find an excuse to exclude him. Nathan never fought back. He simply lowered his eyes, endured the laughter, and waited for the day when school would finally end. That day eventually came, and Nathan walked away from high school with one promise to himself: he would never become cruel just because other people had been cruel to him. Life, however, did not become easier immediately. After graduation, Nathan attended a local college while working nights at a grocery store. He met a kind woman named Rebecca, and for a few years, he believed his life was finally moving in the right direction. They married young, and when their daughter Sophie was born, Nathan felt like he had everything he had ever wanted. But happiness can sometimes disappear without warning. Rebecca passed away unexpectedly after a sudden medical emergency, leaving Nathan alone with a small child and a mountain of bills. At only 32 years old, Nathan became a single father. He spent his days caring for Sophie and his nights trying to build a small technology company from the spare bedroom of their modest home. The company began with an idea Nathan had developed while struggling to manage his own finances. He created a simple software system designed to help small businesses organize their payments and expenses. At first, almost nobody believed in him. Investors rejected him. Banks refused to lend him money. Some people told him that a single father with no powerful connections had no chance of competing in the technology industry. But Nathan remembered the years when people had laughed at him. Instead of allowing those memories to break him, he used them as fuel. He worked after Sophie went to sleep. He worked before she woke up. He worked at the kitchen table while helping her with homework. There were nights when he fell asleep beside his laptop, and mornings when he wondered how he would pay the next bill. But slowly, his software began to attract attention. One small business became 10. 10 became hundreds. Then major companies began using Nathan's technology. Within a few years, the company expanded across the United States. Nathan became a successful entrepreneur, but he never forgot where he came from. Eventually, his company became worth billions of dollars. Nathan, however, did not suddenly become arrogant. He still lived simply. He still drove himself when he could. He still took Sophie to ordinary restaurants and grocery stores. He still remembered what it felt like to be judged by people who knew nothing about his life. Then, one afternoon, an invitation arrived. It was for his 20-year high school reunion. Nathan almost threw it away. He had no desire to return to the place where he had once been humiliated. But then he noticed something strange. The invitation had been sent by Brandon Mitchell, who was now organizing the event. The message described the reunion as an evening of memories, success, and celebration. Nathan later learned the truth from an old classmate named Grace Sullivan. Brandon had discovered Nathan's name in a business magazine and had learned about his company. Instead of being genuinely happy for him, Brandon saw an opportunity. He wanted Nathan to attend because he believed the old classmates would enjoy watching the quiet, awkward boy from high school try to prove that he had become successful. Brandon had even told some former classmates that Nathan was probably exaggerating his wealth. The invitation, in reality, was meant to humiliate him. Nathan knew this. For a moment, he considered staying home. But then he looked at Sophie, who was now a teenager, and remembered everything he had survived. He realized that he no longer needed approval from the people who had once hurt him. So he decided to attend, not to show off, not to seek revenge, but simply because he refused to let his past control his future. The reunion was held at an elegant hotel in downtown Denver. Expensive cars filled the parking lot. Former classmates arrived dressed in designer clothing, laughing and taking photographs. Brandon stood near the entrance, surrounded by old friends, waiting for the moment Nathan would appear. When Nathan finally walked in, the room became quiet for a brief moment. He was dressed simply in a dark suit. He did not arrive with a fleet of luxury vehicles. He did not bring bodyguards or make a dramatic entrance. He simply walked inside with his daughter, Sophie, and greeted people politely. Brandon looked him up and down and smiled. The old memories returned immediately. Some people recognized him, while others whispered that he looked exactly the same. Brandon began making jokes about Nathan's past, asking whether he was still struggling and whether his little business had survived. Nathan remained calm. Then the evening took an unexpected turn. A group of business executives entered the room. Among them was the CEO of one of the largest financial companies in the country. The moment he saw Nathan, he walked across the room and warmly greeted him. The room fell silent. The executive thanked Nathan for transforming the way thousands of businesses managed their finances. He spoke about Nathan's company as one of the most valuable technology firms in the industry. Then, without realizing the tension in the room, he referred to Nathan as one of the youngest self-made billionaires in the country. Nobody laughed anymore. Brandon's smile disappeared. The people who had spent the evening expecting to mock Nathan suddenly realized that the man they had invited as a joke was the most successful person in the room. But Nathan did not celebrate their embarrassment. He simply looked around at the people who had once bullied him and saw something he had never seen before. He saw older faces carrying regrets. He saw people who had changed. He also saw a few who had not. Brandon eventually approached him and apologized. His apology was awkward and filled with shame. He admitted that he had been cruel as a teenager and that he had invited Nathan to the reunion for the wrong reasons. Nathan listened quietly. Then he told Brandon something that surprised everyone. He said that he had spent many years believing that success would make the pain disappear. But becoming wealthy had not erased the past. What had finally freed him was choosing not to become the kind of person who had hurt him. Nathan explained that he could have humiliated Brandon in front of everyone. He could have reminded the room of every cruel joke and every painful memory. But revenge would only give his past more power over him. Instead, he offered forgiveness. Not because what happened was acceptable, but because Nathan no longer wanted to carry the weight of it. Near the end of the evening, Nathan made one final decision. He announced that his foundation would create a scholarship program for students from struggling families in Denver, including students who had been bullied or excluded because of poverty. The room became emotional. Nathan said that when he was young, he had needed someone to believe in him. He never found that person at school. So he wanted to become that person for someone else. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who believes in second chances, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these emotional stories reach people who may be struggling silently and need a reminder that their current situation does not define their future. Before we end, comment my past does not define me if you believe that people can rise above rejection, bullying, hardship, and pain. Nathan left the reunion that night with Sophie beside him. He had entered the room as the boy they once laughed at, but he walked out as something far more powerful than a billionaire. He walked out as a man who had succeeded without becoming bitter, who had gained wealth without losing humility, and who had every reason to seek revenge but chose forgiveness instead. The people who once believed Nathan was a nobody had finally discovered who he was. But Nathan had discovered something even more important. He had never needed to prove his worth to them. He had already known it all along.